What are some deeply unsettling facts that you know? In the 1800s, a lot of dentures were made using the teeth of dead soldiers. The number of people older than you never increases. That's been on my mind a lot actually. I'm 25 and I'm currently still below the average age of the human population. Most people alive right now are older than me. However, that number is dwindling each day and the number of people younger than me increases each day. It makes me realize how fast my life is flying by. The world's most prolific living serial killer is a man called Pedro Lopez. He was convicted of the killing of 110 girls. But he claims he has raped and murdered over 300. His current whereabouts are unknown. There's a rumor that the family members of his victims tracked him down after his release and killed him, but that's never been confirmed. Wait, so he was let out of prison? Man, it's even worse. He was released from prison in Ecuador, and then later on imprisoned in Colombia for another murder, and then released again. Samuel Little in the US has confessed to currently 93 murders. Investigators believe there are many more he doesn't even remember killing. He has killed so many. They bring him pictures and he goes, "Oh yeah, that's so-and-so. I killed her at a drive-in barbecue joint in Texas on a Wednesday night." And they're like, "Son of a bitch. No one knew where or when she was killed but us." And the body count keeps rising and rising. The USA has lost 6 nuclear weapons that were never found. Terminal lucidity is the return of mental clarity, or memory, or consciousness shortly before death. This happens to around 10% of people with dementia. I looked after my dad who had Alzheimer's disease for 3 years. He couldn't remember who I was or anyone else for that matter. He ended having a fall, and when we came to the hospital we were told he wouldn't survive the night. It took 11 days of palliative care before he passed. Worst experience ever. During this time he was unconscious until the day of my birthday, when he woke up, opened his eyes and started speaking very quietly. He motioned me over and said, "Hi son," and told me he loved me and was proud of me. This was the first time in 3 years that he knew who I was. He then spoke to all the family, his brothers and sisters, Mom and my sisters, before spending the day laughing and joking with us all, sitting up in bed like before he had this illness. That night he fell asleep and never woke up again and passed a few days later. I was told that this was very normal, but it really opened my eyes to think he had been in there all this time, not being able to communicate with us. Cows don't convert grass directly into protein. They have enormous colonies of bacteria in their stomachs that have population explosions when they eat grass, live, breed, die, and then the cows digest them into protein. People with dementia just forget how to eat one day. They forget how to swallow. We don't know if they feel starvation or pain, because they're too far gone. My brother works in a dementia care facility, and they know that a patient is gonna die soon when they eventually refuse food. And we don't euthanize them. They just starve to death. And they never tell the families that. This was my grandma's end. I hate what Alzheimer's did to her. The symptoms for a heart attack can be a lot milder than what is shown in movies or TV shows. I have seen people coming in with some discomfort, and then passing due to a massive infarction when we did the angiogram. Quite a few years ago, my grandma took my grandpa to see their GP, and while at his appointment the doctor noticed the symptoms of a heart attack on my grandma. The doctor had her sent to the ER. She had a massive heart attack and she said she only felt mildly nauseous. She's most likely only alive because the GP used to be a cardiothoracic surgeon but gave it up to be a small-town doctor. In 1933, a doctor named Carl Tanzler raided the tomb of a female patient with whom he'd become obsessed and stole her body. He lived with the corpse for 7 years. As the body fell apart, he attached the corpse's bones together with wire and coat hangers, and fitted the face with glass eyes. He was only caught when someone saw him dancing with the corpse in front of an open window. Rainbow Valley at Mount Everest is named so because of the colorful coats of dead people. The blue Mustang statue at the Denver airport, named Lucifer by the locals, killed its creator when a piece fell and severed an artery in his leg. If weird ghost stuff is happening, make sure your carbon monoxide detector is working. The Matthews and the Hart bridges in Jacksonville are about to fail. The pilings in the river do not touch bottom. I'm a commercial diver and I refuse to drive on these bridges. That's my hometown. I hate those bridges. I hate knowing that several people I love drive over those bridges on a constant basis. They're just one more thing on the list of reasons I don't like Jacksonville. There were Holocaust survivors that died shortly after being liberated because their body couldn't handle the increased calories when they were fed by the soldiers that freed them. One of my foster doggos was at high risk of this, and it was horrendous withholding food from a dog who was nearly starved to death. It took months of painstakingly measuring out her food and giving tiny portions every few hours, weekly vet visits, and by the time she was healthy enough for adoption we'd just fallen so hard in love, so now she's our beautiful healthy baby Maggie. The astonishing fatality rates that can be found in so many battles in the First World War weren't accidents, or unfortunate byproducts of the technology. They were factored into the battle plans. By the nature of attritional warfare, it was calculated how many men would be lost every week, and commanders drew up enough reinforcements to replace them. This was called normal wastage. I remember reading about the German plan at Verdun. The idea was to attack a target the French couldn't afford to abandon and force them to throw more and more men into the meat grinder to hopefully deplete the French army. It almost worked too. Some regiments of the French army reported an over 95% casualty rate. In 2018, my sister was murdered. We know who did it. We keep track of where he lives. He has moved 4 times since my sister disappeared. The police also know he did it. There's not enough evidence to bring him in or charge him. Her body has still never been found. If I go after him, he becomes the victim, and I won't be able to be a father to my children. He gets to be alive every day. He's a serial rapist. We suspect my sister was not his first murder. From our interactions with state police and FBI, my impression is that our situation, while a nightmare, is perhaps not as rare as you would normally assume or hope. In the Battle of Verdun, over 1 million artillery shells were fired onto a 19-mile-wide stretch of land in the first 12 hours. If you were lucky enough to survive until then, the sound alone was enough to drive you insane. I visited there in 2005. The ground, after 100 years, still looks like the moon ground. Veteran criminals in the gulags would recruit naive prisoners for their escape attempts, called cows, for the sole purpose of eating them when they ran out of food in the Siberian wilderness. 18th century sailors going between London and Shanghai did the same thing. They used to not use anesthesia on babies when they would do surgery. When I was a toddler, 3 years, in the early 80s, I tripped and fell, which required 11 stitches in my chin. In the ER they strapped me down and did all 11 stitches with no anesthesia. I remember that shit like it was yesterday. So painful, and I was screaming at the top of my lungs. My poor mother couldn't be in the room. How was the constant screaming not a dead giveaway that babies feel pain? Were they just like, dang, this kid's really loud? They knew kids felt pain. They thought that because younger kids don't develop long-term memories, it would hurt but be forgotten and have no long-term effects. And it really fucked up those kids' health for the rest of their lives. Turns out that kind of pain and stress is terrible for your body and mind. In extreme cases of scurvy, your scars break down and old wounds reopen. Collagen keeps scars together, and that collagen maintains itself throughout our lives. But without vitamin C, that process begins to halt and the collagen breaks down. Eat your fruits and veggies, folks. The weirdest thing about scurvy is how it's showing up in well-off people. Some modern diets cut out all fruits and vegetables, leading to very low vitamin C. People then start getting weird symptoms, like bleeding gums. There was a guy at my mate's uni who subsisted on nothing but cheese and bacon rolls and cheap cordial for a semester. Went to the doc. Doc took ages to diagnose him, because, naturally, who the fuck gets scurvy in the middle of Brisbane, Australia, in the 21st century? Mummy brown is a paint hue partially made up of ground-up Egyptian mummies. There are paintings made of dead people. Most serial killers won't ever even be noticed, never mind captured. At least not the ones that are good at it. That's something to think about. Once symptoms start, rabies has a 100% mortality rate. Fortunately, the incubation period is several months, so get that shot ASAP. The youngest person to ever give birth was a 5-year-old girl. Yelizaveta Pantoeva was 5 years old when her 70-year-old maternal grandfather raped and impregnated her. She had her 6th birthday several days before giving birth. Pantoeva's parents did not want the obstetricians to perform a cesarean section, as it was considered dangerous at the time. She gave birth in Kharkiv. The 3 kilograms, 52 centimeters infant girl died during labor due to an early placental tear. She had been born at full term and apparently of good constitution, and, according to doctors, would have survived if she had been extracted more quickly, revived, and oxygenated. After the incident, the family emigrated to Vladivostok, taking the girl's grandfather with them. When you blush, so does your stomach. YouTubers who find animals in distress with the camera running usually put animals in distress to look like heroes. Dogs like squeaky toys because it sounds like prey that's frightened or injured. Years ago, I remember watching an episode of the show Monsters Inside Me where this 16-year-old kid was doing something outside and a fly flew into his eye. It only made contact for about a microsecond, but it was enough time for it to lay eggs. After they hatched, they started eating his eye from the inside, and he was starting to go blind until a doctor finally figured out what was wrong. Just imagine that, getting your eye eaten from the inside and losing your sight all because a fly very briefly made contact with you. Ever since I learned about this, I get really paranoid when there is a fly around my face because of the fact that this could possibly happen to me. The USSR built a massive arsenal of nuclear weapons and then dissolved, leaving poorly paid guards behind who no longer had a USSR to hold allegiance to. This made them vulnerable to being bought off by the highest paying bidder to feed their families, and a whole bunch of those nukes just vanished, and no one knows where they are. One of the few things keeping us from better pharmaceutical products is human ethics and psychology research. A lot could be learned if there were no ethics, but there are now strict rules on what you can and can't do as a researcher. There was a girl named Jeannie who was kept in a closet by her abusive father until the age of 13 without learning how to speak. Through her rehab, we learned a ton about language and the brain, but obviously that should never happen again. Though unlikely, it is entirely possible that the universe has already collapsed, and the end of reality, as we know it, is propagating towards us at the speed of light. We'll never get any warning that it's coming, and it could hit us at any time, annihilating the entire planet in less than 1/10 of a second. All whales eventually lose the energy to surface for oxygen, so they basically just sink and drown. Our lips and anus are made of the same skin type or material, I don't know how to say without it being weird, and connected by one really long tube, would make sense since they both ends to the same tunnel. We are essentially odd-shaped donuts. What are some deeply unsettling facts that you know? Leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.